Our next speaker is Dr. Jocelynne Rainey. Dr. Rainey is a seasoned executive with over 20 years of management experience as a leader in the nonprofit sector in New York City. As president and CEO of the Brooklyn Community Foundation, she oversees and develops strategic initiatives, innovative programs, and community-centered services that embody the foundation's deep commitment to racial justice while furthering its mission to spark lasting social change for a fair and just Brooklyn. Before joining the foundation, Dr. Rainey served as the president and CEO of Getting Out and Staying Out, a citywide nonprofit serving justice-involved individuals. At Getting Out, Staying Out, she oversaw programming which has helped more than 10,000 young men access education, achieve emotional well-being, and secure meaningful employment since its advent 16 years ago. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jocelynne Rainey.
Can you hear me? Great. So first, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here today. And I want to give a special thank you to Sheriff Toulon and his staff. It's been amazing working with them. And I also want to say that I believe in law enforcement. And I believe in law enforcement. I believe in who you are and what you can be. I'm really excited to be having this conversation. And I believe even more in you today because so many of you are here to hear from someone who is not in law enforcement about their leadership journey. So I'm gonna walk through my leadership journey. I hope that is interesting to you. It is my story. I am now the president and CEO of the Brooklyn Community Foundation. I've worked since I was 15 years old. I have never not worked. Started out in fast food. I believe that every job is a good job. And I believe that there are leaders in every area. But I want to go back a little bit. I want to go back to when I was at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. So I was at the Brooklyn Navy Yard for 8 years. And it was my first time really realizing how I can do my work in a way that actually connects my professional and my personal passions. And at that point, I realized that that's the only way that I want to work moving forward. At the Brooklyn Navy Yard, I oversaw a huge portfolio, but the most important work that I oversaw was the work of workforce development and how we connect the community to the economic development that was happening on the yard. The Navy Yard was surrounded by 3 New York Housing Authority complexes, and it was really important that we were able to bring the folks that were in those complexes onto the yard to do the really dynamic work that was happening on the yard. And a lot of that was like all the new technology and STEM jobs and all of that work. And I was able to bring my years of experience in human resources and working in retail to that and really thinking through how do I make sure that we're not just being social servicey. That's what I used to say. Jocelynne would always say, let's not be social servicey. Let's think about what does business really need? What do people really expect? And then how do we bring people into jobs in that way? And with that, I was really able to grow a really robust workforce development program. But while I was there, I was the chief administrative officer. It was an amazing job. I love my job. I live in Brooklyn. I was working in Brooklyn. But I knew at some point that I wanted to lead an organization that was focused on racial justice. And racial justice could look a lot of different ways. To me, it looks like, how do we close the wealth gap between white and Black Americans? And I think we do that through really making sure that people have a meaningful connection to the labor market. And as Lisa was talking about, understanding the trauma and the issues that go on in community. And so there's just so many different ways of doing that. So when Getting Out and Staying Out came across my desk as an opportunity to lead that organization as the CEO, I thought, this is amazing. This is the work I can do. Like, if I'm able to connect young people, young men who have been formerly incarcerated to the labor market, connect them to education and other opportunities, that this would be the way that I would not only impact their lives, but also impact the lives of their families and then their communities. I live in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. I see what someone returning home without an opportunity, what that does to community. But when I took that job, it was in East Harlem. And I don't know how many of you are from New York City, but East Harlem and Brooklyn are very different. And I always knew that I would one day want to go back to Brooklyn when there was the right role available to me. And lo and behold, the Brooklyn Community Foundation role came available. I already had a very close relationship with the foundation. I had a donor-advised fund there where I have a scholarship that my family has that we give $250 a month to a young person who's boarding at school. I also had a relationship with them in general and their connection to all the nonprofits across Brooklyn. And when that job came available, I said, not only will I be able to impact community through one nonprofit, I'll be able to impact community through many nonprofits. So this was the intersection of my love of Brooklyn, my honest understanding that anyone can be philanthropic in any way, no matter where they are in the socioeconomic line, and that it was focused on racial justice and how to look at that work through a racial justice lens. So just want to start by saying first, I am a daughter, whatever that means. I feel like my parents, they shaped me. I am a sister. I'm the eldest of three girls. I am a wife. I am a mother. I'm a friend, and I'm a leader. And I believe that all of that is who I am, and that it all fits together, but sometimes it has to be separate. And I have to be one of those at any given time and give all of my attention to that in order for me to be my best at any of those. So when it's time for me to be a sister, I have to show up in that way. Lisa, I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna leave here on the way home and call my dad and tell him I love him, because sometimes, I have to be a daughter. I have to show up for my parents, especially now for those of us who are in between, being the mother of older adults and also having parents who are in need. So this is who I am. These are the things that are most important to me. So my biggest leadership lessons is that I've learned, and it's very recent, very recent in my career, that I have to have priorities. And I believe that everyone who's in a leadership role has to have priorities in their life. Not just priorities on what we're gonna do as we're doing tasks every day. It's like priorities of what comes first in your life so that you're making the right decisions in regards to what you're gonna tackle. And when I think about priorities, my priorities go in this order. It is me, myself, my health. That's really important. If I'm no good, no one is any good. My second priority is my family. And for me, that family means my husband and my two sons who are adults. They're 28 and 24, but being available to them, because I realized there were times when I didn't make myself available, that I didn't realize that you have to be clear about your priorities. My next priority is my job, because nothing is possible if I'm not working, if I'm not able to pay for everything that I'm doing. And my fourth priority is my friends. I am a woman's woman. My friends really fill my heart. I am not one of those women who say, oh, I love being around other women, especially women who are in the same arenas as I am, working, mother, all of those things, wife, all of those things. It just fills my heart. And when I think about those priorities, the reason why I say priorities, it's not about just like saying these are your priorities. It's like making choices based on those priorities. That means that if my friends are like, we want to go to Miami, which we do every year, but it falls on April 18th, which is my anniversary, I'm going to have to say no, right? Because my family comes before that. So it makes it a lot easier to make choices. When I was, if I wake up at every morning, I wake up at 5:30 in the morning to work out. There was a period of time I started to realize that, I was so busy working, I wasn't taking care of myself. And I would see people, I know we all see people around us that you're saying, wow, that person's gaining weight, or they're talking about their blood pressure or these issues going on. And I realized that I was prioritizing my work over my health, or maybe my kids over my health. And that if I'm not healthy, then I won't be here for anyone else. So that means that I have to say, in most occasions, to my staff, realistically, don't plan anything, no meetings before 9:30. unless it's absolutely necessary, because I need to make sure that I can get up, get to the gym, get home, and work out. If I have a doctor's appointment or a dentist appointment, I do everything I can do to keep those appointments, because I realize that there were times in my life, and I'm sure in all of our lives, where we said, oh, it's okay to have that meeting at 8:30 that could have waited, or we say that, you know what, I'm going to cancel this doctor's appointment that, you know, I've been waiting for months, and now I'm going to wait another few months for it because, you know, my boss needs me to do something. It's really important to prioritize yourself, but again, your priorities should be your priorities. Like, everyone should go home and write their priorities. What's first? For some people, it's going to be their parents. Again, I said it's my, you know, it's my kids and my husband. And so that means that, you know, you have to make choices. The next thing is really about following your passions and not dollars, right? Like, it's really important. You know, people say you're going to do great at whatever you love, and you're going to make money at whatever you love. And I truly believe that. You know, I didn't talk about the role that I had before the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Before the Brooklyn Navy Yard, I was doing human resources in a specialty food store. And I really enjoyed that job. I learned a lot. It was really impactful, and something about learning about being in a for-profit business, right? Like, you have to understand the whole business, and, you know, you have to understand, like, you know, P&Ls and all those things helped me. But at some point, I realized that I wasn't feeling passionate about this work. I loved being able to kind of guide and create policies and practices that really help the line employee and really help them to create a DEI program that I was really proud of. But I was missing that mission piece. And I said, you know, I want to go back to mission-driven work. So when the Brooklyn Navy Yard came about, I said, wow, that's Brooklyn, it's big, let me see, you know, I want to go there. It was a human resources role. I had been in human resources for many years before the Navy Yard, and I entered the Navy Yard in human resources. And so I said, I called someone, I said, what does the role pay? And the role paid $60,000 less than what I was making. And I was like, all right, you know what, I'm gonna go interview, because I will tell you, I think that any interview is a good interview when you're starting to think about where you want to go next, because it's always good to practice. I'm going to interview. They're going to see what a really good HR person looks like, and I'm going to get an opportunity to interview. They're never going to meet me where I need to be, but let me go. Went to the interview and thought, oh my God, this is an amazing role. I love this role, but I can't take $60,000 less. Went back to my job, didn't send a thank you note. I always send a thank you note. Never don't send a thank you note. And I said, you know, because this is like, there's no way I can do this. I mean, I can't do this. And I went back into the rut and thought, I really don't want to be here anymore. Nothing else was coming up. So I called my husband. I still remember the day. And my husband's a school principal, so, you know, we can't just live off of one salary. And he says, and I go, honey, can I take this job? I know it's a lot less money, but if I can take it, I'll figure it out. I'll be here for a year, and I'll get the experience, and I'll go somewhere else. And he said, okay, go ahead. We'll figure it out. It'll be fine. And they ended up calling me back. I thought I was going to call them. They called me back, and I went back. And they, you know, obviously I showed them what a really good HR person would look like. And so they made me an offer. It was $30,000 less than I was making, but it was better than $60,000 less than I was working. And I will say that I would never be where I am in my career if I didn't take that step back. And I've done that a couple of times in my career. But I took that step back, and in that step back, I went to the Navy Yard, leading human resources, one-woman show, and this is where I think leadership is at anywhere that you sit, is that I realized that there was a lot of opportunity for me, and I built an HR department. And then I realized that they were doing workforce development. And I realized that the thing that kept me up most at night was whenever I was doing hiring, and I would meet a young man who looks like one of my kids, or looks like my husband, and I would see they would be all tatted up, or, you know, and I would think, I can't move them forward to the hiring manager, because the hiring manager is going to say, what is going on here? And I can't say to them, you know what, when you go into the interview, cover your tattoos, sit up straight, you know, all the things I would say to my kids, and I would end up not being able to hire that person. So when I found out that the Navy Yard had a workforce development program, which was actually preparing people for work, putting them in jobs, but they weren't the hiring manager, I said to my CEO, can I run that department? And the CEO said, yeah, you know, no one else is really doing that right now. They're not paying a lot of attention to it. You go ahead and run it. And I brought in a whole new model, again, that was focused on the employer and not on the person. And of course, with that, what I was able to do was get more people jobs. And these jobs were jobs that they were able to retain because we were preparing them for the jobs in a way that employers wanted. So all of my experience working in the for-profit sector helped me to connect my community to work now that I'm working in the nonprofit sector. So with that, I was able to then move into the Chief Administrative Officer position. But what I will say is that where I ended up at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, I would never have ended up in salary in the for-profit sector doing the work that I was doing. So I really believe you follow your passions. You don't follow the dollars when you can. We all need dollars. We have to, you know, be realistic. But when you can, you know, you don't want to jump and move for just another few $1,000s. And I did it again when I moved to GOSO. I took a $30,000 cut. But I will say that in my role now, they would not have hired someone who had never been a CEO before. So it was really important for me to get that experience, and I understood that. So it's really important to think about that. The other thing is really trust yourself. You know, it's so important to trust yourself. Like, trust your gut, trust yourself, trust your decisions. Like, as a leader, whatever you're leading, it's important to trust yourself. And trust that if you're doing things and it's coming from the right place, and you're doing it for the right reason, that even if it's wrong, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. It's only when you don't trust yourself or when you're not doing something for the right reasons that you have to question your decision making. You should always feel confident in your decision making. And also always follow the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have done unto you. You know, with great power comes great responsibility, as Spider-Man would say. I also had children who were very much into superheroes. And you know, it's just really important to follow the golden rule. Like, understanding for me as I grew in leadership, and very early on in leadership, what I realized is, one, is that not everybody wants what I want. Like, I might think, like, I want to be CEO one day, I want to be, you know, I want to be in charge of this, I want to be a boss. But there's people who, that's not what they want. Their priorities are very different. And they want to, you know, they want to be home, you know, with their children. There are times when I look back and I'm like, oh, I didn't spend enough time doing that. So it's very important to just think of treat everyone as you would treat yourself, and know that not everybody wants what you want. So you should look at everyone as a resource and that they have value. And then be courageous. As leaders, you know, the most important thing is that we have courage. Oftentimes I think of that as one of the first things that you have to be, is that you have to be courageous. You have to feel comfortable in your decision making. You have to feel comfortable confronting people. You have to feel comfortable even managing up. You have to be courageous as leaders. It's so important. And lead with grace and understanding. I use that word a lot as a leader. I've just learned to start, you know, saying that, like giving each other grace, like really believing. I don't know if, you know, there is the, it was the 4 agreements, I think it's the 5 agreements, but one of the rules in there is really to just don't think that anyone is bringing you any harm. Like, honestly, trusting that people are doing things for the right reason, trusting what people say, even though, you know, they may not act in the way that they're speaking, and also understanding that when someone comes to you with something and they say, listen, I believe that, you know, what you said or what you did was harmful to me, right? It's okay to understand, like, perceptions are reality, and it might be their perception, might not be your intent, but to be able to try to understand why they felt the way that they felt, And explaining to them about why you were doing that is really important. And like understanding that it's important to lead with grace. For instance, if someone is every day they're behaving in a certain way and you lead them, ask them why. Ask them why. And the why might lead to you having to have some courage and say, maybe this isn't a good fit to you, but the why might also lead you to saying, wow, maybe we can put something in place or we can accommodate you in some way. So leading with grace is really believing that people always have your best interest at heart, because if they don't, we always figure that out anyway. It's gonna come to light. So there's no reason to lead from a place of distrust. And take care of yourself, as I talked about earlier. Take care of you. Make sure whatever it is that makes you feel good, that you're working out if you need to, that you're eating right. My husband works in education. Every time I go to someone's school, if you live in New York City, you know schools are in some really tough neighborhoods. There's not really always good, healthy places to eat. And a lot of times I see my friends who are working in schools, they never leave their offices. They don't get a healthy meal. They're eating fast food. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Make sure you're getting enough sleep, because if you're not going to be the best leader that you can be. I always say if I'm too tired, I'm like a 2-year-old. If you know how a 2-year-old is, when they don't get enough sleep, they're all over the place. They don't know what they're talking about. So it's really important for you to know what's important to you and what you need to be healthy, to feel good, to take care of yourself. And that also includes spending time with your friends. It includes knowing when to shut it down. It includes setting, I tell my team I don't like the idea of boundaries because it's hard to have boundaries at work, right? You can't say I have to leave at exactly 5 o'clock, but make sure you're creating environments where there's balance, where your team can come to you and say, my kid has a recital today, I need to go home at 4. Or what I'll say to my team is like, I have a date night tonight, I'm have to leave at exactly this time. But I also want them to know that, balance means that sometimes early on a Sunday morning or a Saturday, I'm working. So you have to figure out as leaders how to create balance for your teams and talk from balance. Because I know my team right now, a lot of my younger staff members talk about like, I have to have lunch at this time, I have to leave at exactly this time or else you're taking advantage of me. And I explain to them, I wanna have balance where you can come to me and you can live a full life, give 100% here and 100% at home through balance. So create balance for yourself as well. Make sure that you're doing that. And be a continuous learner. None of us know everything. All the education in the world will not get us to a place where we know everything. Want to learn from your constituents, want to learn from your staff, want to learn from your community. Always be a learner and thinking about it from that perspective. Like, what am I getting from that, and how am I going to be able to use that in my leadership? So ask questions, ask your team questions, ask them like, why do you do this job? Because those kinds of things are really going to be helpful to you being able to motivate your team if you're asking them why they're doing it. Working at organizations, especially like mine, and probably like law enforcement, right? It's about the work, the mission, when in reality, it might be for someone that, I've been working with Bob for, 6 years. I really enjoy having lunch with him every day. That's why I get up and come to work and do the best job I can do every day. So it's really important to always be a continuous leader. My leadership style. I am definitely a transformational leader. I am a leader who likes to be on the dance floor. I would never, I don't know if I would never. Right now I would say I would never. I like to prepare myself. It would be difficult for me to go into a role where I didn't have to make change, where there wasn't room to expand and to grow. I am a leader who likes to think about how do we do more? How do we cast a wider net? And I do that by authentically being me. I always tell people, I say I try to show up every day as me so that everyone can show up as them, and so that also when people show up that look like me, people will think that person is competent. So I would say, like, I come with my curls and, my curves and my my state education, and I come with all of that, and I bring my whole self and my community to everything that I do, and I talk about those things. And everyone should come as their authentic self, because I truly believe that there is something that we can garner or get from everyone. And I believe that diversity is really about diversity in thought, and that you need diversity in every aspect of your work in order to be successful. So we should be looking for people who are not always like me, but people who are different and think different in order to be successful. And everyone should be encouraged to bring their authentic selves. And they should be able to do that and feel like they're in a safe place always. I think of myself, I know that I have to be inspiring. I want to be a leader who is inspiring. I can feel confident in saying today, I feel like I am an inspiring leader, and it took a lot of time to get there. As a young leader, it was a lot of, I know this is what you do, and now it's how do I inspire you? So I think that I've become an inspiring leader. I know that I'm inspiring, and that's the other thing as a leader. You have to be confident and know who you are so that you can also admit when you're wrong, right? So I know that I inspire my team, and I know when I didn't inspire them, and I know the work that I've done to get there. I'm a visionary. I have a vision. Every leader needs a vision. What I tell a lot of people, as folks, when folks see you in a certain role, they're like, how did you get there? I want to do that job. Leaders lead through vision. They don't lead through tasks. Like, they don't say, I led a team of this many people. I work with the facilities team, and I made sure that we served all these folks. Like, that's not what a leader does. A leader talks about what they see, what it could look like, what they want to do, how they're going to get there. So it's really important to be visionary. I'm a hands-on leader. That's not always good. I spend way too much time on the dance floor and not in the balcony, but I also know that's who I am. And I know that I'm the kind of leader who needs to be hands-on. And the way that I talk to my team about that is that if you don't want me on the dance floor, you're gonna have to really make sure that when you bring me something that you're able to give me the detail I need in order to keep me off the dance floor, because that's who I am as a leader. And I accept that. And like I said, it's not always good, and in some ways it kind of scares me about my growth and what I'm gonna do next. And I believe in collaboration. So I believe that you need to hear everyone's voice. There is a story that I always appreciate about Sephora. When they were trying to figure out how to hire more women, they, in technology, they couldn't figure it out because a lot of women didn't have the skills to do the work. And at some point, they just decided to lessen the requirements and bring on women. And what they got through that was they got a lot of insight into the product and how the technology should look to actually attract the people that they wanted to attract. So it's really important to have people on your team and then talk to them and ask them, like, what should we do? I don't always believe in consensus, though. And there's a difference between collaboration and consensus. So I don't always believe that everyone should have a say in what we do and the projects that we take on. So collaboration could look like, we're going to do these listening tours, which we're doing right now, across Brooklyn. That's what I want to do. It's really important to me to hear from the community. Collaboration is, what neighborhood should we go to? That's what collaboration is. So there's a real difference, because consensus can oftentimes slow you down. So what I think makes good versus great leaders. So I think that a great leader understands and embraces their humanity and the humanity of others. I think that great leaders admit when they're human and when they're falling short. A great leader says, I was really exhausted today, or that decision I made was not the best decision, and you know what? We're gonna have to backtrack and start over. A great leader is okay with showing that they're human, okay with sharing their humanity, and also understanding the humanity of others, and making sure that they're allowing people to bring their humanity. And so when someone says, I can't come in today because the school is closed and I need to stay home, then that's how you have to allow that person to be human. If someone is having a bad day, you're understanding that, sometimes folks have bad days. A great leader brings themselves, they are themselves, they try to be their whole selves. They fight through, the feeling that they are, the imposter syndrome feeling, the feeling that they don't belong, that they don't try to adapt someone else's style or their language, that they actually come and they bring themselves and they allow people to see them that way. And I had my last CEO when I was at the Navy Yard. What I loved about him is he cursed all the time. And I just thought that was so authentic. And the fact that we could sit there and, we could curse about something or that, he had to have lunch every day. So I never had to starve in a meeting because I knew I could bring my salad to the desk with me. That's a good leader, right? That's somebody, and so I knew that's the kind of leader that I wanted to be as well. And that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. And that you can say, it's okay not to know. And it's okay to literally think this person who has this role that I hired them for is actually smarter than me in that area. And I'm going to let them speak. And I'm going to let them represent us in that way. And that's okay. We don't, as leaders, you don't have to know everything. You don't have to know exactly how everyone does their role. There's no way you can do that. And it's okay not to be the smartest person in the room. And it's okay to ask a question. If I'm sitting in a room with you and you're using language or you're doing work that is very particular to what you do, and I say to you, I don't know what that means, that's okay too. And I had to learn that because I would sit in a room sometimes and pretend I understood something that I didn't understand and just sit there and leave and not know what was said to me and then think that, if I said I didn't know, someone would think I wasn't as versed as I should be on something that I should be versed on. So it's really important to know it's okay not to know. Nobody knows everything, and that goes back to showing your humanity. So making sure that you know that. And then surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. Surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, people who know their trade very well, people who can represent you well, because I always think that if you are an excellent leader, then you're above reproach. It doesn't matter if someone has more skills than you in a certain area. You want people who have more skills than you in a certain area. You also want to learn from them. You do want to spend time with them. You do want to understand what they're doing, but you also want to make sure that you're comfortable with people who might be smarter than you in certain areas. And also, the other thing is to embrace diversity. Diversity, like I said, diversity is huge. I really hate when people think of diversity as black, white, gender. To me, that's some diversity, right? You want that kind of diversity because you want people on your team that can talk to your constituents, the people that you work with that are from their community, have the same background. But you also want to make sure that you're getting young people. You want to make sure that you're getting people from the LGBTQ community and that they feel comfortable being in space with you. And you want to make sure that you're giving everybody an opportunity as a great leader to be able to sit at the table and represent themselves as their whole self. Because I can't tell you how many times, and I will tell you this, I have walked into rooms and have felt like you let me in the room, but now you're ignoring me, right? Really being a great leader is not only saying, okay, now I have all this representation. Being a great leader is now making sure that that representation feels belonging. And sometimes that means going out of our way to make sure that that happens. That means that, for me, it means stopping at people's desks, actually asking them about what do you have on your screen? What are you working on? Explain that to me. Or what I do too is take a lot of people out to lunch or coffee or something like that so they can get to know me intimately and know who I am as a person, because I'm also the kind of leader that kind of puts my head down, I work, I run out, I come back, so I know I have to be intentional about it. Diversity to me means things like I say, like hiring people who might come in with black nails or goth, right? It's so important to think of diversity broadly because as a black woman, I don't want you to think of diversity as just hiring me because of the color of my skin.
I want you to think you need me and you want all kinds of diversity on your team because you want to make sure that you're representing all kinds of thought and experiences so they can say, well, this is what happened when I was younger, or this is what people like in my community, or, you know, I could, you know, this is the church you should go talk to because this is where, you know, this is really where people, these are really the people that folks respect, right? So it's really important that we don't think of diversity as just like checking off quotas, that we're actually thinking about diversity around, we want diversity because we want to have all of those different thoughts in our work. Again, we talked about it, have a vision. I just can't, it's so important to have a vision, not just to what do I want for this department? What do I want for this community? What do I want for this organization? What do I want it to look like when I leave? What do I want it to look like in 10 years? What do I want for it? And being able to talk about it broadly. And like I said, I've heard so many people say that it was difficult for them, and I said this earlier, to get into these kinds of roles because, and I would listen to them like, you don't have a vision. You don't have a vision, and you don't even really know what's going on. So you need to have a vision. And it's important that whatever you do, you feel personally connected to it, that you take it personally. When I'm talking to someone, again, about our work at the Community Foundation, what happens is that, you know, to interview them for that, they will talk about they want to, you know, they want to undo structural racism because that's what we do. I'm like, well, why? Because it's wrong. It needs to be dismantled. But why? Well, you know, it's wrong, right? But and that's going to be difficult for me to hire that person. But the person says, you know, I want to undo structural racism because, you know, I see in my community that, you know, that people are marginalized, there's unemployment, how could we get that done? I know that this thing happened with my family. Like, whatever it is, it should be something that you personally care about, and you should take your work personally and really think about how, if you're doing something, how does it impact you personally, and why are you doing it personally, and what does it mean to you? And I always say, don't respond to everything. Not everything deserves a response. I recall being a young leader, and if you said something that I didn't like, I'd get to my computer and start typing a long email back to you and telling you, you know, what you did wrong and why you did it. And even with staff members, people will send me an email and say, you know, I didn't think it was right that this happened, and I will say, I'll leave it and think about it for a day or two. Like, not everything deserves your immediate response or requires your immediate response, and not everything requires a response. So it's really important to understand that as a great leader, you don't have to respond to everything. And again, be courageous. You know, think about everything you do, about how you're going to be courageous in this moment and why you're doing this, and how you're going to make the best decision for your business, for your work, for your department, and that you're going to do this even if it means that, you know what, it's something that you didn't feel comfortable doing. It means that a relationship that you really valued is going to be harmed a little bit, that you're going to have to do what is courageous in order to be the best leader that you can be. So the foundation, they asked, like, how do we impact community? So I impact community, one, by, like I said earlier, it has to be an intersection of my personal and my professional has to be connected. I didn't realize this when I was younger, how important it was that I felt personally, and that whatever I'm doing, that it's actually important to me personally as well as it is professionally. And that as an organization, as a department, as a people, as a person, that you are putting your resources where your mouth is. If you believe in training and development for your team, that you are actually investing in training and development for your team. That you're making a way that the majority of your budget is going to that. If you believe in bringing community services to community, then that you're investing in those community services, that you're actually doing that. That you are actually putting your money where your mouth is. And also that you're meeting the community where they are. And so meeting the community where they are means that you're actually going into the community, whether that means that it's your work community, you're actually going to the lunchroom and sitting with your team and talking to them and understanding them and going to where they are. If it means, like it means for me, real community, like going outside and going into Brooklyn, going to their communities, going to their churches, going to their small businesses, meeting with them there, asking them to come close to where they are instead of asking them to come to me. And also, you want to build and do for community. So you want to build with, and you want to do for your community. And that's how I impact community, is that I build with and I do for the community in which I say that we're serving. So that means that I do listening tours. I look at small nonprofits that are right now too small for us to support, but I try to think about like what other resources, how can I make them large enough? How can I help them to build their budget? How can I help them to be able to thrive and be able to get more funding beyond the funding that we can give them? How can I introduce them to the right people? And I do that by listening to those communities, not by me actually saying I know what's going on. I always tell people I don't believe in learning. I mean, I have my doctorate, I love research. I believe in research, but I don't believe that research, academia, or theology is really what tells you what communities need. I believe that you have to go in communities because communities are always changing. They're always changing. I lived in Park Slope, Brooklyn for many, many years, and when I lived in Park Slope, I could park. There were a lot of young couples that looked like me. Now you go to Park Slope, there's no couples that look like me. You can't park anymore. When I moved to Bed-Stuy, it was a community that had a lot of drug misuse issues. It had a lot of, there were no stores where you could get fresh vegetables. It was a food desert. There were all these issues in Bed-Stuy. Now there's still issues in Bed-Stuy. We have, the gun violence is up, and I think it has a lot to do with displacement. And we do have a lot of issues, but they're different issues. There's different issues in Bed-Stuy. There's a lot more gentrification happening there. There are families that are looking for places for their kids to recreate. And then there's also the issue of people struggling with housing instability and things like that. So I say that to say that every community I've lived in Brooklyn has changed dramatically in less than 10 years. So I can't go by what I knew about those communities. I have to go back into communities. So first, I think that the way that we impact, or how you impact community, how we impact community, for me, is that I go into community. I go into community and I ask people, what's going on in your community? What do you need? Who's actually doing the work? Because I might think that I know. I might say, oh, I think United Way is doing the work, or I know this organization. But I've gone into communities and it's like, no, Miss So-and-so across the street, she watches our kids at night so we can go to work from 12 to 8 a.m. That's what she's doing. Or they'll say, like, she needs more support. How can you support her? Or they'll say that the mutual aid group that you can't support right now, they're bringing food to the seniors who live in the housing complexes who won't come outside anymore because they don't feel safe. I went to Sunset Park in Brooklyn and found out that people over 60 were their EBT monies were being stolen off their EBT cards, $600. I didn't even know this, $500, and they couldn't buy food, and they couldn't get through to the city on that. And then just the other day, I went to Bay Ridge, where I heard that the smoke shops are selling things that look like candy to children, right? So it's just like the things that I would never know, I learned through going into community and talking to community. So it's so important to go into community and hear from them, like what is going on, listen to them, and learn from them, and then figure out what you're gonna do for community. So what I heard from community, almost every community, was that their biggest, that they didn't feel like there wasn't a scarcity of programs or organizations that were actually doing the work that they needed to be done, but what they didn't have is space. So they didn't have any place where they could bring a donor and show them the work. The kids didn't have a recreation space. There's no space for them to have a small fundraiser or to meet or to partner. And so I'm thinking, oh, those are the small things that I could do as a foundation, is maybe I could help to subsidize space for them. I heard from that community that they don't have places where people can actually get food on a regular basis. And the other big thing is social media platforms, is that a lot of small communities don't know what other people in their communities are doing, and they don't have any way to learn from them. So those are the things that I've learned from communities, is that a lot of communities feel like we have the right organizations, the people, but we're just missing some of these resources that you could probably help us with that would look like, low-hanging fruit for you, but it would really do something huge for the community. So it's so important to go into community, listen to the community, learn from them, and then do. Don't listen to academia, theology, and then do. Learn and then do. So I motivate my staff. First, I learned about leading with integrity. Leading by example and leading with integrity. I'm still old school. I'm still the first one in. Every time I'm in the office, I'm not always in the office, but I'm the first one in. And not because I feel like I have to be the first one in, but I feel like, if they have to be in every single day, and I'm having days like this where I'm here early in the morning, or I need to at least show them that when I am here, I'm here. I'm here for them, because part of showing up is just being there so people can come to you and talk to you. So I try to lead that way. I lead with integrity. I'm honest. I try to do the right thing. I try to do the right thing for the right thing's sake. Like, I've been taking the subway a lot lately. I have a car, but I can walk to work, which is a beautiful thing. And I've been taking the subway because I'm like, I can't in good conscience, even if the company would pay for it, spend $50 on an Uber every time I want to go someplace, just because that's what I want to do. If I say that our mission is to serve people. And I lead in that way, and it's interesting because I'll run and staff will say, I just saw you on this train. And I'm like, yeah, I was there on the train, right? And so it's really about leading by example, but also leading with integrity, like always doing the right thing for the right thing's sake. I share my shortcomings. I always share with my team, like, my shortcomings. I have a big thing where I tell them, I don't know if anyone else has this, where I struggle with niceties. Like, I'm not the kind of leader that comes in and says, hi, how are you, what's going on? And I'm the kind of leader that walks into your office and says, I need so-and-so right now. And, they'll say, oh, she never, so I had to say that this is who I am, but let me explain to you why I'm like that. And also, I will also spend time with you outside so you can see when I'm like that. You'll also say that, this is not who she is all the time and who she is as a person. I believe that leaders, our job is to develop our people. Anyone on my team should be able to move to the next position, whether it's with me or with someone else, because I invested in their development. So developing and training people is hugely important to making sure that you're motivating your team. Letting people know that you see them by saying to them, like, what would you like to learn? By letting them, thinking about what their next step is. And again, going back to what I said earlier, is that not everybody wants what you want. Not everybody wants to move to that next level. Not everybody, I've had teammates, staff members who have worked for me that are amazing. Their kids are going to much better colleges than my kids went to. They go on much more fabulous trips. But they don't want to do what I'm doing. So it's important to understand that as well, and not think that everybody wants to move up. But you do want to make sure that their development and training is intentional, and that you're helping them to create their plans, and that you're talking about it often. Be curious. Again, ask them why, ask them what they're working on. Ask them, do they need your help? Because I don't know how many times I've had staff members say, about a leader that, oh, that person never helps out, or, they see me doing all this work, even though we can't see everything. And that's why it's important to be curious and stop and ask. Because staff assume you see everything. They assume you know everything, because you are the boss. But so you have to know that you have to ask questions. You have to be curious. Listen and learn, again, the same from your staff. Listen to them, learn from them. Ask them about what happened previous to you being there. Ask them what happened in a meeting. What do they think? Ask them their thoughts, because their thoughts could be really helpful. I don't know, when I do performance reviews, the self-review helps me remember so many things that a staff member had done before that I just completely forgot. Create opportunities to get to know your staff. Build that into your leadership. Create opportunities, whether that means, coffees, whether that means occasional outings. I know it's hard to get away from our desk. I know it's hard to get away from our work, but it's really important to make sure that you're creating opportunities, even if it means more work for you on the back end. I know that every time I do a staff outing, it means that I'm gonna be working late that night, but that's what I took this on, so that's part of my responsibility. And so it's so important to create opportunities for you to get to know staff, but also for them to get to know you. Again, collaborate, ask them their opinions, and recognize strengths, even in your most quiet staff. When I used to do HR, I would be very intentional about telling managers, you have to recognize the people who are not like, hey, see me, look, I'm coming to your office. Also recognizing the people that show up every day on time, the people that are delivering great customer service, the people that are like taking on a little extra, but they're not the ones who are, coming to you every day to tell you what they're doing. It's our job to make sure that we recognize that. I have a managing up story. One of the questions I was asked was about a leader who there was something that happened that helped me to think through how I would maybe lead differently. And I think about the one thing that came to my mind. I've had so many different leaders in my career, even and when I worked at Hardee's and Wendy's. I have amazing managers that I still think about today when I worked in direct care. But the one thing I remember about one leader who was the president and CEO of a nonprofit that I worked for many years ago is that he had a habit of when one person did something wrong, he would tell all of us, like, no one can do this thing anymore, and someone did this, and because they did this, I'm gonna ask everyone to go to a training, and you would walk away confused. I'd walk away confused, like, is he talking about me? Most of the time I didn't think he was, because I have that inflated sense of self. He would say, or I would say, why is he making me do this when I do everything right? Like, why is he making us all go to this training when it's not about me? And he would do this all the time. Or if he was upset, he would walk by and not speak, and I really did, and he was one of my favorite leaders. I did a lot of growth there, but I said, when I lead, I'm gonna be direct. Right? I think that you're doing people a disservice when you're not letting them know directly where they could grow, where they made a misstep. When you're not letting them know directly that that you need counseling for this thing, or you made this issue. And this goes back to, firstly, trust, like grace, like hoping that they're not doing it on purpose and saying, hey, you've come in 6 days late this week. What's going on? And if they say to you, I haven't been able to get my alarm clock. I've been, turning off my alarm clock and going back to sleep. You'll say, that can't happen again. If you come in a 7th day late, I'm going to have to, do progressive discipline. Whereas if someone says, my kid has been sick, they need a nebulizer in the morning, I've been late because they've been sick, and that's why you ask the question first, because you don't want to immediately assume someone is doing the wrong thing, and you could say, oh, well, do you think it'd be better for you to start your day at 10 instead of at 9, right? But those direct, courageous conversations are really important, and your staff would appreciate it from you as well. So I always think about that person when I think about what's a way that I wouldn't want to lead, is that I don't want to lead by generalizing everyone, or by not directly helping people to grow. And also understanding that having those conversations is a way to help people to grow. And then lastly, advice I would give myself today when I was younger, I would say one is sit at the table that you belong at, even if you're not invited to that table. No one has to invite me to the table for me to sit at the table. If it's a table that I belong at and I'm supposed to be at, I'm gonna sit at the table, I'm gonna share my ideas, I'm gonna trust myself, and I'm gonna be there. I'm not gonna sit in the back. And that's both literally and figuratively. Like, I'm gonna sit at the table. The other thing I would say to myself is forgive yourself. Forgive yourself, forgive yourself, forgive yourself always and fast. Like, just, you know, there was a lot of time I spent second guessing myself, thinking about something, why did this happen, knowing that, you know what, that I made a mistake, and just saying over and over again, like, oh, you know, rethinking it, redoing it, trying to fix it. Just forgive myself, and then think about how you're not gonna do that thing again. And sometimes just recognizing it wasn't as big a deal as I thought it was. So I would say that. I would say try to get myself off the dance floor and making sure that I'm on the balcony more so I can see what's happening and I can help my staff and be more of a strategic partner with them than being that person who is on the dance floor. And then I would also tell myself a lot sooner that it was really important for me to bring my whole self as a leader to my work every single day, not second guess myself, not have imposter syndrome, which, you know, we all have. I still have every now and then, but I get through it a lot quicker because I forgive myself and I understand what it is and what it looks like and what it does to me as a leader and what it takes away from me. So I would tell myself to make sure that I am bringing my whole self and that I trust myself and that I have done all the work that I need to do and that I belong in this room and that I'm gonna make sure that everyone else who's in the room feels like that they belong too. And that's my story. So thank you.